Okay, welcome back. We've got the shots off of the camera and into Lightroom here, where I'm going to do a little bit of work on them in Lightroom and just prep them a bit to do most of the work in Photoshop. So you can see all the shots I took, obviously starting out with all those test shots to build up the lighting. You know, there's just that one key light on her, me moving it up the top, etc., etc. Fill light coming in, and then finally the hair light and me mucking around with that. And then what you saw me do in the last video was taking this picture, which was just me sticking something in front of the lens so I knew where I was going to start doing a series of images to do a focus stack with. So what this sort of tells me in terms of my organization is every photo past this point are ones that I've used or ones that I've taken to use with a focus stack, meaning I haven't touched the lens, I haven't changed the lighting. All I'm doing is taking shots of different focal points across her face and upper body to allow those all to be combined with focus stacking, which I'll show you in the next video in the Photoshop part of this. A couple of shots that went kind of crazy out of focus. Actually, I think that's just focusing on her shoulder, so that's okay. But what I do in Lightroom, especially with a series of images that are going to be focus stacked, is I just work on one of them. So I can pick one, do all the work I need to do on it, and then when I've finished, I can actually copy every single adjustment and setting I've made onto all the others and then export the lot in one go. That's going to make a lot more sense when I do it than explaining it to you like then, but it's important you work this way with focus stacking so you can ensure adjustments you do make in Lightroom are made identically to all the images in your series. Now, you don't have to work this way. If you wanted to, you could just skip Lightroom altogether and just open these up all straight in Photoshop, but I find it really, really useful to just do a little bit of tidy up work in Lightroom before we head into Photoshop. Just the way I work, because I like the sort of organization tools in Lightroom, which isn't really Photoshop's strong point, but there isn't really much you can do in Lightroom that you can't do in Photoshop. So we'll start with this first one in the series, and I need to head to the Develop tab. Just close it up again so you can see what we've got here. So this is going to be my standard kind of Lightroom workflow. So I'm not going to touch the exposure, a little underexposed, which is good, how I always shoot, because I want to sort of bring things up with dodging and burning. And what I actually do is I pull the highlights down because I want to actually retrieve or pull back more of the highlight information that's probably lost. So you can see with that at 0, this is all quite hot here. Whereas if I just dial that back, you know, about there, it's bringing some of that detail back, and you know, we're going to be able to selectively make certain areas lighter, darker when we do the dodging and burning in Photoshop. What was I going to say? Now, obviously, as I've zoomed in on this, what you can immediately see is loads of the shot is out of focus. Now, you're just going to have to accept that when you work with these shots in Lightroom, because obviously you're working on one image where only part of the shot is going to be in focus, and obviously the other parts of the face that are out of focus are going to be spread across all the other shots. So it's only when you're going to see the final focus stacked image that you'll see everything come together and be in focus. So when you do these color adjustments, just bear that in mind. You know, you are making adjustments on things that are out of focus, but obviously with these settings copied and pasted across to all the other images, you know, these settings are going to apply to all the focus parts. I hope that makes sense. Again, it will make more sense to you when I show you this in a minute. So a little bit of the highlight information brought back, and equally the other thing I like to do is just nudge the shadows up. This isn't that dark an image, so you know the shadows aren't very, very black, so it doesn't really need much brought back there, but I'll just budge it a little bit so you know the blacks aren't too crushed. You can start compensating for that with, you know, pushing the whites up, pulling the blacks down if you want to, but again, don't really need to do that here because you can do that with dodging and burning to get that kind of contrast. But to just get a kind of quick overall level of contrast, you know, I might push those a little bit. I can see it's already made the sort of head area a little bit too hot there. So yeah, I think we'll just back that off and deal with it in Photoshop. Now, vibrance. Yeah, this is already pretty saturated. So the idea with vibrance is it's kind of like a saturation control, but correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. I believe what this does is it pushes up sort of saturation of everything except for skin areas, because you don't want to saturate the skin too much. Problem with this with toys is, you know, you're not really working with pure skin tones. So be very, very careful of this depending on what you're taking photos of. In the case of this, which is one of Hot Toys' amazing products, it's actually got almost perfect skin tones. So I would expect this to behave pretty much as if this was a human subject. And if I push it up, you can kind of see it doesn't actually affect the face until we get really right towards the end. But in this case, I'm not really going to do much with vibrance, because what it's actually doing is just making this sort of orange highlight even more orange. And I don't want to make that sort of any more color than it already is. I'm very happy with what's come out of the camera. So I'm not going to touch that. As I say, normally I probably would push this up, but in this case I don't need to for this image. Down here I'm going to slap some sharpening on. With my camera, I always go to about 80, shooting at ISO 100. You can see I go as low as I can with ISO usually, because I'm shooting toys, I can use a long exposure, so you can shoot at a nice low ISO and get a noise-free image. But even with a bit of sharpening like that, it is going to bring up some noise, so I would drag the noise up to, you know, around about there. Let's have a look at the little preview. Yeah, I can tell from the grain just at looking at this that's about okay, and it's about the same thing I do on every shot. So you'll find you just get used to these settings when you do this a lot. I'm not going to do any vignetting or anything here because I can do that in Photoshop with a lot more control. So that's it. That's all I need to do in Lightroom. Now I've got this first photo in the stack edited. If you look at the second one, you can just about see the sort of subtle shifts I've made in terms of tone and things. So what I want to do is I want to apply all the settings I've made there across all the other photos. Now, worth noting, if you'd used anything like cropping or brush adjustments in Lightroom, you can actually copy those as well. So the trick to doing this is right click on the photo, go to develop settings, and then copy settings. You can see you can select everything you may or may not have worked on. So normally I find stuff like crop isn't selected. So if you've done a crop, you might have to select it. Same with things like spot removal, lens corrections, etc. But I can see everything that's checked there is the stuff I've touched and a lot of stuff I haven't touched. So I hit copy, that's on the clipboard. Then you want to click the next photo in the series, go to the last photo in the series. If I scroll along, and I hold shift down on the keyboard, select all those, and then you can right click any of these, go back to develop settings and paste settings. Now what that's doing is it's duplicating all the adjustments I've made precisely across every single photo in the stack. So these are all ready to export. So for me, now I'm going to select all the photos because they've all been treated now, right click anywhere in the selection, then I go export, export again, and then I just always dump out all of these in the same folder as the raw camera files, and I save to PSD. We'll go Adobe RGB, and I always do 16-bit. And that is it. So click export, and then I just have to wait for all of those to export, and then I can open them up in Photoshop. So that's it for this video. In the next part, we'll do some work on this in Photoshop and finish this image off. So see you in the next video.